My dad placed his hand on my 7-month pregnant belly in front of 52 guests and said, "Just don't raise her to be another expensive disappointment like you." The entire room went silent. The champagne glass in my hand trembled. I watched my mother bow her head, like she always did. I watched my husband grip the armrest of his chair. And I watched my mother-in-law, Eleanor, 63 years old, 35 years as a family attorney, slowly rise from her seat and tap a silver spoon against her wineglass. "Good news," she said, her voice as calm as if she were reading contract terms. "This child will never need you. I'm Hannah, 32 years old, and this is the story of the day I stopped trying to prove I was worthy to a man who never wanted to see it." If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. To understand what happened at that baby shower, you need to understand the 15 years that came before it. My father, Gerald Whitmore, built Whitmore Properties from nothing, or so he reminded everyone at every dinner party, every holiday gathering, every chance he got. 3 commercial developments in Atlanta, a net worth he never disclosed but constantly implied. The kind of man who measured success in square footage and closing deals. I was 17 when I got accepted to Emory University with a partial scholarship, finance major. I remember the exact moment I told him, standing in his home office surrounded by framed photos of ribbon-cutting ceremonies. "Finance?" He didn't look up from his laptop. "So you can work for someone else? I'm not paying $80,000 for you to become an employee." I went anyway. I took out $45,000 in student loans. I paid them off in 8 years, working 60-hour weeks while my friends were taking vacations and buying houses. But none of that mattered to him. Every family dinner followed the same script. Somewhere between the salad and the main course, he'd ask, "So what's your salary now?" And before I could answer, he'd compare it to his quarterly revenue. "That's what I make in a week, sweetheart, maybe 2. My mother would change the subject. My brother would suddenly need to take a phone call, and I would smile and nod and tell myself that next time I'd have something impressive enough to make him proud. I learned to count my successes in numbers he never asked about, the clients who trusted me, the projects I delivered on time, the nights I slept soundly knowing I earned my money honestly. But his numbers were the only ones that seemed to matter. The second sign should have been my wedding. 3 years ago, Marcus and I stood in front of 200 guests at the Piedmont Garden Tent. White roses, string quartet, the kind of wedding I'd dreamed about since I was a little girl. When my father stood up to give his toast, I actually felt hopeful. Maybe this was the moment. Maybe seeing me in that dress, seeing how happy I was, would finally make him see me differently. He cleared his throat, raised his glass, and looked directly at Marcus. "Marcus, you're a brave man. My daughter doesn't know how to cook, doesn't know how to manage money, and you'll probably have to support her for the rest of your life." He paused for the laugh that rippled uncomfortably through the crowd. "But hey, at least she's pretty." Everyone chuckled nervously. I laughed too, the way I always did, the way I'd trained myself to do. What I didn't notice was my mother-in-law's face. Eleanor Mitchell had only met my father twice before that day. She sat 3 tables away, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips, watching him with an expression I couldn't read at the time. Later, much later, she told me what she was thinking in that moment. "In 35 years of family law," she said, "I've seen hundreds of relationships destroyed by people who disguise cruelty as humor. The moment your father made that toast, I started paying attention." I didn't know it then, but Eleanor had begun keeping notes. Dates, quotes, patterns. She was building a case. And I was still laughing at my own humiliation, telling myself it was just his way of showing love. Fast forward to September 2024. 7 months pregnant. First baby. A girl. Eleanor insisted on planning the baby shower herself. She booked the Magnolia Room, a private dining space at one of Atlanta's most elegant restaurants, and handled every detail. The guest list grew to 52 people, family from both sides, close friends, colleagues from Sterling and Moore where I worked as a senior financial analyst. "Let me do this for you," she'd said when I tried to protest the expense. You deserve one day where everything is perfect. I wanted to believe her. The morning of September 15th, I woke up at 6 a.m. with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with the baby. I'd called my father the week before, practically begging him to just show up and be pleasant. Dad, I'm not asking for a speech or a gift. I just want you there. And I want you to be kind. There was a long pause on the line. Then, I'll be there. Let's hope this time you've done something worth celebrating. I swallowed the response I wanted to give, like I always did. That morning, while I was getting dressed, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender, Margaret Collins, CFO of Sterling and More. Subject line, Congratulations, official promotion confirmation. I meant to open it, but the doorbell rang. The florist had arrived early, and I slipped my phone into my purse without reading it. Some part of me wonders now if things would have been different if I'd seen that email before the party, if I'd walked into the Magnolia Room knowing what I was worth on paper. But maybe it was better that I didn't. Maybe I needed to learn my worth a different way. Marcus found me standing in front of the bedroom mirror, one hand on my belly, the other smoothing down a dress that didn't quite fit the way it had 2 weeks ago. You okay? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. Fine. The word came out too fast. Just nervous. He crossed the room and stood behind me, his hands settling on my shoulders. In the mirror, I could see the concern in his eyes. Do you want me to talk to your dad before the party? Set some ground rules? I shook my head. I can handle it. I've been handling it for 32 years. That's not the same as being okay with it. I didn't have an answer for that. Marcus turned me around gently, tilting my chin up so I had to meet his gaze. Hannah, listen to me. I didn't fall in love with you because you're good at enduring things. I fell in love with you because you deserve to be respected. And our daughter, he placed his hand over mine on my belly. She doesn't need to grow up watching her mother tolerate disrespect to keep the peace. The baby kicked, right against our joined hands. I felt something crack inside me. Not break, crack, like a fault line shifting. What if he does it again? I whispered. What if he says something in front of everyone and I just freeze? Like I always do? Marcus pulled me close. Then I'll be right there. And so will my mom. You're not alone anymore. I nodded against his chest, but the truth was, I still didn't know what I would do. I'd spent my whole life choosing peace over dignity. I wasn't sure I knew how to choose differently. Eleanor arrived at the Magnolia Room 2 hours before the guests, carrying a garment bag, a box of handmade decorations, and a brown leather tote that seemed heavier than usual. You're early, I said, hugging her carefully around my belly. I'm always early. It's a lawyer thing. She smiled, but there was something sharp behind her eyes. Alert. Like she was preparing for a deposition rather than a baby shower. As we arranged the gift table together, I noticed her slip a thick manila envelope from her tote into her purse. The kind of envelope that held legal documents. What's that? Eleanor didn't miss a beat. Insurance. Insurance? Sweetheart, I was a family attorney for 35 years. I never walk into any gathering without a backup plan. She patted her purse. Old habits. I wanted to ask more, but the caterers arrived with questions about the appetizer arrangement, and the moment passed. Later, while we were adjusting the balloon arch, Eleanor mentioned casually, I spoke with your grandparents last week, Richard and Dorothy, just checking in on their health. I paused, a ribbon in my hand. You called my grandparents? They're lovely people. Your grandmother sent her regrets that they couldn't make the trip from Savannah, but she wanted me to give you something later, a gift from them. What kind of gift? Eleanor's smile was gentle but unreadable. You'll know when you need to know. At the time, I didn't think much of it. My grandparents were 84 and 81. They rarely traveled anymore. And they'd always had a complicated relationship with my father, something about different values that no one ever explained. I had no idea that phone call would change everything. The guests began arriving at 2 o'clock. My father made his entrance at 2:15, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. My mother Patricia trailed behind him in a soft blue dress, her smile already apologetic. I watched from across the room as Gerald worked the crowd before acknowledging me. He shook hands with Marcus's uncle, introduced himself to my colleague Lisa, made sure everyone within earshot knew exactly who he was. Gerald Whitmore, Whitmore Properties. You've probably seen our development in Buckhead, $12 million project, just signed last month. 15 minutes passed before he made his way to me. Hannah. He looked me up and down, his gaze settling on my belly. You've gotten big. You should watch what you're eating. Don't want to have trouble losing the weight after. My mother touched his arm. Gerald, she's pregnant. She's supposed to. I know she's pregnant, Patricia. I'm just saying. He turned back to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You look fine, sweetheart. I'm just looking out for you. I felt Marcus stiffen beside me, but I squeezed his hand. Not now. Thanks for coming, Dad. Of course, family is important. He glanced around the room, assessing. Nice venue. Your mother-in-law has good taste. Must have cost a fortune. Eleanor was very generous. He was already looking past me, scanning for someone more interesting to talk to. I should say hello to some people. We'll catch up later. He walked away without another word. Marcus leaned close to my ear. He mentioned his $12 million project twice in the first 15 minutes. I counted. I almost laughed. Almost. That's actually low for him. Lisa Chen, I'd worked with her for 4 years at Sterling and Moore, found me by the dessert table, pulling me into a careful hug. You look amazing, she said. Pregnancy suits you. You're sweet. And a liar. But I appreciate it. We were laughing when my father appeared at my elbow, champagne in hand, eyes fixed on Lisa's designer blazer and Cartier watch. And who's this? He extended his hand before I could make introductions. Gerald Whitmore. I'm Hannah's father. Lisa shook his hand politely. Lisa Chen. I work with Hannah. Ah, so you're her boss? No, we're on the same team, different portfolios. My father's smile sharpened. Well, maybe you could give her some extra projects. She needs to learn what real hard work looks like. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then Lisa laughed, not nervously, but with genuine disbelief. Mr. Whitmore, Hannah manages a $47 million client portfolio. She's one of the top performers in our division. Lisa glanced at me, then back at my father. Actually, I probably shouldn't say this yet, but she's just been recommended for promotion to director. The announcement should be official any day now. I felt my face flush. Lisa. What? It's true. You've earned it. My father's expression flickered, something between surprise and irritation, before settling back into practiced amusement. Director? At someone else's company? He chuckled. That's nice, sweetheart. But working for other people, that's not real success. That's just making someone else rich. Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but I touched her arm. Thank you, Lisa, really. Dad, could you excuse us? I pulled Lisa away before she could say anything else, before my father could say anything worse, but the question lingered in my mind. Director. Was it official? That unread email suddenly felt very heavy in my purse. I wasn't there when it happened, but Marcus told me about it later. My father had spotted Eleanor near the gift table and made his approach like a shark circling prey, slow, deliberate, assessing. Mrs. Mitchell. He positioned himself beside her, champagne glass tilted at that angle men use when they want to appear casual and superior simultaneously. I hear you used to be a lawyer. Retired now, right? Must be nice having all that free time. Eleanor didn't look up from the gift she was arranging. I retired because I wanted to, Mr. Whitmore, not because I had to. Of course. His smile didn't waver. Family law, wasn't it? Divorces and custody battles. Not exactly high-stakes work. Now Eleanor looked at him, really looked at him. 35 years of protecting families from people who tried to destroy them. I found it quite meaningful. She paused, adjusting a ribbon. Speaking of which, I heard your Buckhead project is having some permitting issues. Something about environmental impact assessments? My father's face went pale for exactly 1 second. That information wasn't public. The permitting delay had been kept quiet, handled through back channels. How could she possibly know? Eleanor smiled pleasantly. I still have friends in various industries, old colleagues, people talk. She met his gaze directly. Don't worry, Mr. Whitmore. I have no interest in real estate. I only care about family. Gerald recovered quickly, but something had shifted in his posture. The easy arrogance had tightened into something more defensive. Well, he said, already stepping back, enjoy the party. He walked away faster than necessary. Marcus, watching from across the room, caught his mother's eye. She gave him the slightest nod. Whatever was in that manila envelope, she was ready to use it. My phone rang at 3:47 p.m., right in the middle of the party games. The screen showed Grandpa Richard with a photo of him and Grandma Dorothy from last Christmas, both of them smiling, his arm around her shoulders, her silver hair catching the light. I excused myself to the hallway. Grandpa? Hannah, sweetheart. His voice was thinner than I remembered, but warm. Always warm. We're so sorry we couldn't be there today. Your grandmother's hip has been acting up, and the doctor said no long drives. It's okay, Grandpa, I understand. But we wanted you to know, we have a gift for you. Eleanor will give it to you after the party. It's important. Something in his tone made me pause. What kind of gift? He was quiet for a moment. In the background, I could hear my grandmother saying something I couldn't make out. You'll understand when you see it, he said finally. But Hannah, I want you to know something. You have always been our pride. Always. From the moment you were born, you were the best thing to come out of this family. My throat tightened. Grandpa, I mean it. Don't let anyone tell you that you're a disappointment. You never were. You never will be. His voice cracked slightly. The only disappointment in this family is the people who can't see what's right in front of them. I didn't know what to say. My grandparents had always been kind to me, but they rarely spoke about my father. There was something unspoken there, some old wound I'd never fully understood. I love you, Grandpa. We love you too, sweetheart, more than you know. After we hung up, I stood in that hallway for a long moment, wondering what he meant. I would find out soon enough. Marcus found me in the hallway, still holding my phone. Everything okay? I saw you step out. My grandparents called. They couldn't make it, but they're sending a gift through your mom. I slipped my phone back into my purse, and that's when I remembered the email. Oh, I got an email this morning from Margaret Collins, the CFO. I haven't had a chance to read it. From Margaret? Marcus's eyebrows rose. On a Sunday? I know, probably just something about the Henderson account. I pulled out my phone again, scrolling to find the message. Hannah! My cousin Amy appeared in the doorway, camera in hand. We're doing the group photo. Everyone's waiting. I glanced at the email notification. Congratulations. Official promotion confirmation. And felt my heart skip. I'll read it later, I said, dropping the phone back into my purse. But Marcus had seen the subject line. I caught the look on his face. Surprise, then something softer. Pride. Hannah. Later. I squeezed his hand. Whatever it is, it can wait. He nodded slowly, but I could see him processing, deciding whether to say something. In the end, he just kissed my forehead. Go take your picture. I'll be right there. As I walked back into the main room, I had no idea that email would become evidence. That in less than an hour, I would need every piece of proof I could find that I wasn't the failure my father had spent 15 years claiming I was. The subject line burned in my memory. Congratulations, official promotion confirmation. Director, $185,000 a year, a title that meant something, and I almost missed it entirely. The gift opening portion of the party began at 4:15 p.m. I sat in a decorated chair at the front of the room, Marcus beside me, while friends and family presented their offerings. A hand-knitted blanket from my aunt, a complete set of organic baby care products from Lisa, a vintage music box from Marcus's grandmother that had been in the Mitchell family for 4 generations. Each gift came with hugs, well wishes, and the kind of genuine warmth that made me forget, momentarily, about the tension coiled in my chest. Then my father stood up. "I have something special for my daughter," he announced, loud enough to ensure everyone was watching. He walked to the front of the room holding a cream-colored envelope. The crowd quieted, expecting something heartfelt. Maybe a college fund. Maybe a meaningful letter. I should have known better. "Open it," he said, handing me the envelope with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a handwritten note on his company letterhead. I read the note silently. Condition: use this money for the baby's education, not for frivolous things like her mother used to waste money on. My hands trembled slightly. I looked up at him, hoping, stupidly, desperately hoping, that this was a joke, that he would laugh and say he was kidding. "Read it out loud," someone called from the back. "What does it say?" My father answered before I could. "Just some fatherly advice. I told her to make sure my granddaughter doesn't repeat the same mistakes." He chuckled, looking around the room for validation. "Hannah dropped out of her MBA program halfway through, you know. Couldn't handle the pressure. I don't want my granddaughter to inherit that tendency." The room went very, very quiet. Because that wasn't true. I had never dropped out of anything. I felt 52 pairs of eyes on me, some confused, some uncomfortable. A few, Lisa, Marcus, Eleanor, radiating barely contained fury. "Dad," my voice came out steadier than I expected. "I didn't drop out. I graduated. MBA class of 2018, magna cum laude." My father waved his hand dismissively. "Graduated, dropped out, what's the difference? You still ended up working for someone else instead of building something real. The difference is the truth. The truth is you could have done more." His voice carried that familiar edge, the one that always made me feel 6 inches tall. "Everyone in this room knows you had potential, Hannah. You just never lived up to it." I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. "Gerald, that's enough. I'm just being honest, Patricia. Someone has to be." He looked around the room, appealing to the crowd. "I've supported this girl her whole life, paid for her education, gave her every opportunity, and what do I get? A daughter who's satisfied being average." The baby kicked hard against my ribs. Once. Twice. I looked down at my belly, at the life growing inside me, and something crystallized. This child would hear these words someday. This child would watch her mother sit silently while her grandfather called her a disappointment. This child would learn that love came with conditions, that approval had to be earned and could be revoked at any moment. Unless I stopped it, unless I chose differently. But I didn't know how. 15 years of swallowing my words, of keeping the peace, of being the good daughter who never made waves. I didn't know how to be anything else. I opened my mouth to respond, to defend myself, to finally say something. And that's when my father reached out and placed his hand on my belly. His palm was warm through the fabric of my dress. Possessive. Like he was claiming something that belonged to him. "This baby," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "is a chance to get it right. A do-over." He looked directly at me, and his next words landed like stones dropped into still water. "Just don't raise her to be another expensive disappointment like you." The background music, some soft playlist Eleanor had chosen, suddenly seemed deafening in the silence that followed. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there with my father's hand on my unborn child, and his words echoing in my skull. Expensive disappointment. 15 years of criticism, condensed into 3 words, delivered in front of everyone I loved and respected. I saw my mother bow her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. I saw Marcus rise from his chair, his face white with rage. I saw Lisa's mouth fall open in disbelief. I saw my cousin Amy frozen with her camera halfway raised. And I saw Eleanor. She was already standing, moving, her silver spoon catching the light as she lifted it toward her wine glass. The clear, crystalline sound of metal against glass cut through the silence like a blade. Everyone turned. Eleanor stood at the center of the room, perfectly composed, her posture that of a woman who had faced down hostile witnesses and opposing counsel for 35 years. Her eyes met my father's, and in them I saw something I'd never seen directed at him before, complete, unwavering certainty. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, "I've been silent for 3 years, since your daughter's wedding, since I watched you humiliate her in front of 200 people and call it a toast." She paused, letting the words settle. "That ends today." My father's hand dropped from my belly. He turned to face Eleanor with the expression of a man who had never been challenged in his own territory. "Excuse me? You heard me." Eleanor set down her wine glass with deliberate precision. "I've spent 3 years documenting your behavior toward Hannah. Every comment, every joke, every time you made her feel small in front of people who should have protected her." Gerald laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "Documenting? What is this? A courtroom?" "No, this is a baby shower, a celebration of new life." Eleanor's voice remained perfectly level. "But since you've chosen to turn it into something else, I have an announcement to make." She reached into her purse and withdrew the manila envelope I'd seen earlier. My heart stopped. "What the hell is that?" Gerald's amusement was fading, replaced by something warier. "This," Eleanor said, "is a certified copy of a legal document, specifically the last will and testament of Richard and Dorothy Callahan." The room seemed to contract. I heard someone gasp. Maybe my mother, maybe me. "My parents?" Gerald's face went pale. Why do you have—" "They sent it to me last week." Eleanor opened the envelope slowly, deliberately. "After I called to check on their health and happened to mention how you treated their granddaughter at her wedding 3 years ago. They were disturbed. They asked me to review their estate documents." She pulled out a sheaf of papers, each page bearing the distinctive stamps of legal certification. "Would you like me to read the relevant section, Mr. Whitmore? Or would you prefer to step outside and spare yourself the embarrassment?" Gerald didn't move. Couldn't move. Neither could anyone else. Eleanor smiled, a small, precise expression that held no warmth whatsoever. "I'll take that as permission to proceed. Before I tell you what was in that document, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been belittled by someone in your own family in front of others? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below and let me know. And if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what my mother-in-law revealed next. Because what she was about to read would change everything." Eleanor held the document at arm's length, her reading glasses perched on her nose, every inch the attorney she'd been for 35 years. "This is the certified last will and testament of Richard Allen Callahan and Dorothy Mae Callahan, dated August 28, 2024, and notarized by Morrison and Associates in Savannah, Georgia. August 28th, 3 weeks ago. My grandparents had changed their will 3 weeks ago." The relevant section reads as follows. Eleanor's voice filled the room like testimony in a courtroom. "We, Richard and Dorothy Callahan, being of sound mind and body, hereby revoke all previous testamentary documents. We specifically exclude our son, Gerald Raymond Whitmore, from any inheritance, bequest, or benefit from our estate." My father made a sound, something between a gasp and a growl. Eleanor continued without pause. "This exclusion is made with full knowledge and deliberate intent, based on Gerald's systematic emotional abuse of our granddaughter, Hannah Whitmore Beckett, over a period of 15 years. We have witnessed his cruelty, his belittlement, and his refusal to acknowledge her worth. We will not allow our legacy to support such behavior." The room was utterly silent. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and unsteady. Therefore, Eleanor read, we direct that the entirety of our estate, valued at approximately $2.4 million, be transferred directly to our granddaughter, Hannah Whitmore Beckett, to be held in trust for her and her descendants. She lowered the document and looked at my father. Your parents wrote you out of their will, Mr. Whitmore, completely, because of how you've treated your daughter. Gerald's face had gone from pale to gray. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time in my life, I watched my father rendered completely speechless. That's a lie! Gerald's voice cracked on the second word. He lunged forward and snatched the papers from Eleanor's hands, his eyes scanning the pages with desperate intensity. This is fake. My parents would never. He flipped to the last page, searching for something, anything that would prove it wasn't real. This notary stamp. This signature. It's forged. It has to be forged. Eleanor remained perfectly still. The contact information for Morrison and Associates is on the final page. You're welcome to call them. I'm sure they keep excellent records. I'll sue. I'll contest this. You can't just... Contest what, Mr. Whitmore? Eleanor's voice cut through his sputtering like a scalpel. Your parents are alive. They're competent. They made this decision with full legal counsel. There's nothing to contest. Gerald looked around the room wildly, searching for an ally. His eyes landed on my mother. Patricia, say something. Tell them this is insane. My mother lifted her head slowly. Her cheeks were wet with tears, but her voice was steady. Gerald, maybe you should stop talking. What? I said stop. She stood up, her hands trembling, but her spine straight. For once in your life, stop talking and listen to what you've done. Gerald stared at her like he'd never seen her before. In 35 years of marriage, she had never, not once, told him to stop. This is my family, he said, his voice rising. These are my parents, my inheritance. You don't get to... Your parents, Eleanor interrupted calmly, chose to protect their granddaughter from you. That should tell you something. Gerald's face contorted, rage and humiliation and something that might have been fear, all fighting for dominance. He was losing control of the room, and everyone could see it. In the chaos of the moment, Marcus appeared at my side. Hannah. His voice was low, urgent. The email. You need to read it. Now. He pressed my phone into my hands, the screen already open to Margaret Collins's message. I read it once, then again. The words blurred and sharpened as tears I didn't realize I was crying fell onto the screen. Read it out loud, Marcus said. Everyone should hear this. My hands were shaking, but I found my voice. Dear Hannah, I read. I am pleased to officially confirm your promotion to Director of Client Portfolio Management, effective October 1st, 2024. Your new compensation package includes a base salary of $185,000, a performance bonus of up to 15%, and equity options vesting over 4 years. I paused, swallowing hard. This promotion reflects your exceptional performance, your dedication to our clients, and your leadership within the team. Congratulations. You've earned this. Warmest regards, Margaret Collins, Chief Financial Officer, Sterling and Moore. The room erupted. Lisa was the first to react, letting out a whoop that probably violated every social norm of a baby shower. I knew it! I knew it! She grabbed my colleague David's arm. Didn't I tell you? Didn't I say she was getting director? Applause rippled through the crowd. My aunt was crying. Marcus's grandmother was beaming. Even people who barely knew me were clapping, caught up in the moment. And through it all, my father stood frozen, the will still clutched in his hands, watching his narrative crumble in real time. Expensive disappointment. $185,000 a year. The math didn't add up. It had never added up. He just hadn't wanted to see it. Eleanor waited for the applause to fade before speaking again. Mr. Whitmore. Her voice carried the quiet authority of closing arguments. You asked me earlier what I was planning to do. Now you know. She walked toward him slowly, each step measured and deliberate. For 3 years, I've watched you diminish your daughter. I've watched you mock her choices, belittle her achievements, and make her feel worthless in front of people who love her. She stopped an arm's length away. I've watched her cry after family dinners. I've watched her doubt herself despite every success. I've watched her try, again and again, to earn approval you were never going to give. Gerald opened his mouth to respond, but Eleanor raised one finger, a gesture that had silenced witnesses and opposing counsel for decades. I'm not finished. He closed his mouth. Your daughter manages a $47 million portfolio. She just made director at one of the most respected financial firms in Atlanta. She graduated magna cum laude from a program you claim she dropped out of, and in 2 months, she's going to be a mother. Eleanor's voice softened, but only slightly. She has never needed your approval, she has never needed your money, and she has certainly never needed your cruelty. She turned to look at me and her eyes were warm. Hannah, sweetheart, you are not a disappointment. You never were. Then she turned back to Gerald, and the warmth vanished. And the good news, Mr. Whitmore, the news I came here to deliver, is that this child will never need you, not your money, not your conditional love, not your impossible standards. She gestured to the room full of people who had just witnessed everything. She has a family, a real one, and you're not part of it. The room was waiting. I could feel it. 52 people holding their breath, wondering what I would do. For 15 years, I had done nothing. Smiled, nodded, made excuses, kept the peace. But the peace had never been real. It had only been silence. I stood up slowly, one hand on my belly, and faced my father. Dad! He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between defiance and fear. I spent 15 years trying to make you proud. I worked harder than anyone I knew. I paid off my own student loans. I built a career that I'm genuinely proud of. My voice was steady, steadier than I'd expected. And none of it was ever enough for you. Nothing I did was ever enough. Hannah, I'm not finished. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't apologize for them. Not this time. I used to think that if I just achieved one more thing, one more promotion, one more success, you'd finally see me, finally be proud. I shook my head slowly. But I understand now. It was never about what I achieved. It was about control. It was about making sure I always felt small enough to need your approval. I placed both hands on my belly, where my daughter was shifting, restless. I'm going to raise this child to know her worth. Not because someone else validates it, but because she's inherently valuable. And I'm going to protect her from anyone who tries to make her believe otherwise. I met his eyes directly, including you. You're cutting me off? His voice was incredulous. Your own father? I'm setting a boundary, for the first time in my life. I took a breath. You're not welcome in my daughter's life until you can treat us both with basic respect. What happened next surprised everyone, including me. My mother stood up. Patricia Whitmore, the woman who had spent 35 years smoothing over her husband's sharp edges, apologizing for his jokes, keeping the peace at any cost, rose from her chair and walked to stand beside me. Gerald. Her voice was quiet but clear. I've been silent for too long. My father stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Patricia, what are you? I'm talking now. She turned to face him fully, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Resolve. For 35 years, I told myself that keeping quiet was keeping our family together, that if I just didn't make waves, everything would be fine. She reached out and took my hand. But watching you put your hand on my pregnant daughter's belly and call her a disappointment in front of everyone she loves, her voice cracked, but she pushed through. That's not a family, Gerald. That's a hostage situation. The room was absolutely silent. I should have protected her. My mother's tears were flowing freely now, but she didn't wipe them away. Every time you made her feel small, I should have said something. Every cruel joke, every impossible standard, every time you made her cry, I should have stood up. She squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, Hannah. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you sooner. Mom, I'm going to stay with my sister tonight. She looked back at Gerald, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. We need to talk, but not here, and not until you're ready to listen. She kissed my cheek, whispered, I love you, and walked out of the room without looking back. My father stood alone. For the first time in his life, completely alone. Gerald looked around the room one final time. 52 faces stared back at him. Some pitying, some disgusted, none sympathetic. His business associates, his wife's family, his daughter's friends and colleagues. All of them had just witnessed his humiliation, not inflicted by anyone else, but revealed by his own behavior, documented and exposed. I won't stay here to be disrespected, he said, straightening his jacket with hands that trembled slightly. This is a setup, a conspiracy. Eleanor's voice was mild. It's not disrespect, Mr. Whitmore. It's consequences. You... He pointed at her, then at me, then seemed to lose track of what he wanted to say. This isn't over. Actually, I said quietly, it is. At least until you're ready to take responsibility for what you've done. Not if I hurt your feelings. Not, I was just joking. Real accountability. Gerald's jaw tightened. For a moment I thought he might argue, might launch into one of his speeches about how he'd sacrificed everything for this family, how ungrateful we all were, how he was the real victim. But something in the room had shifted. The audience he'd always played to wasn't playing along anymore. Without another word, he turned and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then someone started clapping. I don't know who it was. Maybe Lisa. Maybe Marcus's uncle. Maybe one of the caterers who'd been watching from the kitchen doorway. But the sound spread, rippling through the room until everyone was applauding. Not for the drama, not for the spectacle, for the ending. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, my mother-in-law's arm around my shoulders, and let myself feel something I hadn't felt in 15 years. Free. If you've made it this far, I have a question for you. Do you think Hannah should give her father another chance? Or was setting that boundary the right call? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you know someone who's dealing with a similar situation, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step toward change. The fallout began within 48 hours. Atlanta's business community isn't as large as people think. Everyone knows everyone, and gossip travels faster than quarterly reports. By Monday morning, Gerald's phone was ringing off the hook, but not with congratulations. Gerald, I heard something disturbing this weekend. That was Richard Palmer, his partner on the Buckhead development. Something about a scene at your daughter's baby shower? People are talking. By Tuesday, the story had evolved, the way stories do. Did you hear Gerald Whitmore got written out of his own parents' will? Apparently he's been emotionally abusing his daughter for years. I heard his wife left him, right there at the party. Someone told me his daughter is some kind of executive, makes almost 200 grand a year, and he called her a disappointment? By Wednesday, the consequences became tangible. The permitting issue Eleanor had mentioned, the one Gerald thought was being handled quietly, suddenly became more complicated. The environmental impact assessment that had been under review was now requiring additional documentation. The city contact who had promised to expedite things stopped returning calls. On Thursday, Gerald's partner requested a meeting. Look, Gerald, I don't care about your personal life, but my investors do. They're asking questions about your judgment, about your character. Richard Palmer leaned back in his chair. We might need to restructure the partnership agreement, just until things settle down. Restructure, the business equivalent of we're seeing other people. Gerald Whitmore had spent his entire life building a reputation, a brand, an image of success and control and unshakable confidence. It took one baby shower to crack the foundation, and the cracks were spreading. 1 week after the baby shower, my mother called. Hannah, I need to tell you something. I was sitting in my living room, feet up on the ottoman Eleanor had insisted I use, a cup of decaf tea cooling on the side table. The baby was doing somersaults against my ribs. What is it, Mom? I've spoken with a lawyer. I'm filing for legal separation. I nearly dropped my tea. Mom, are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Her voice was different than I'd ever heard it, clearer, stronger. I spent 35 years convincing myself that keeping quiet was the same as keeping peace. But there was never any peace, Hannah. Just silence. And silence isn't the same thing. I didn't know what to say. My mother had always been the peacekeeper, the smoother over, the woman who made excuses for my father's behavior because confronting it seemed too hard. I'm staying with your Aunt Carol for now, she continued. I've already started looking for an apartment. Something small, just for me. Mom, my voice cracked. I'm proud of you. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I should have done this years ago. I should have protected you. You're doing it now. That's what matters. I want to be there when the baby comes, if you'll let me. Of course, but Mom, I hesitated. I need you to do something first. I need you to see a therapist, someone who specializes in this kind of thing. I need to know you won't let Dad pull you back in. There was a long pause. That's fair, she said finally. I've already made an appointment, Tuesday at 10. For the first time in my life, my mother was choosing herself, and I had never loved her more. The first email arrived 2 weeks after the baby shower. Subject: We need to talk. Hannah, I think we should discuss what happened. I may have said some things that came across wrong, but you have to understand, I was blindsided. Your mother-in-law ambushed me in front of everyone. That wasn't fair. I'm your father. I deserve a chance to explain. Call me, Dad. I didn't respond. The second email came 3 days later. Hannah, I don't understand why you're ignoring me. I've always wanted the best for you. Maybe I push too hard sometimes, but that's because I knew you could do better. Is that really so terrible? Your mother has lost her mind. She's talking about separation. This is tearing our family apart. I need you to talk some sense into her, Dad. I forwarded it to Eleanor without comment. The third email arrived a week after that. Hannah, I'm sorry if you felt hurt by what I said at the shower. I was just trying to give you honest feedback. That's what fathers do. But I think you're overreacting. Cutting me off from my own grandchild? That's cruel. That's not the daughter I raised. I'm willing to move past this if you are. But you need to meet me halfway. Dad. Eleanor read all 3 emails and shook her head. Notice the pattern, she said. I'm sorry if you felt hurt. That's not an apology. That's blame. He's not sorry for what he did. He's sorry you reacted to it. So what do I do? Nothing, not yet. She set down her tea. Real change doesn't come from one conversation. It comes from sustained effort. Therapy, self-reflection, accountability. She met my eyes. Until he does the work, words are just noise. I called my grandparents on a Sunday afternoon 3 weeks after the shower. Grandpa, it's Hannah. Sweetheart. His voice was warm, if a little weaker than I remembered. We've been thinking about you. How are you feeling? How's the baby? We're good. She's kicking up a storm. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Grandpa, I wanted to thank you for what you did. The will. There was a long silence on the line. Then my grandmother's voice, slightly muffled as she picked up the extension. Hannah, dear, we should have done it years ago. But why now? What changed? My grandfather sighed. When Eleanor called us after your wedding 3 years ago and told us what Gerald said in his toast, we were horrified, but we told ourselves it was a one-time thing, that he'd change. He didn't change, my grandmother said quietly. He got worse, and we kept making excuses. kept hoping. When Eleanor called last month, my grandfather continued, and told us he was still doing it, still making you feel worthless, still tearing you down, we knew we had to act. We couldn't let our money go to someone who would use it as a weapon against our granddaughter. I was crying now, silent tears rolling down my cheeks. We love Gerald, my grandmother said. He's our son. But love doesn't mean enabling cruelty. And you, Hannah, you're the best thing to come out of this family. You always have been. I don't need the money, I managed. I just needed to know you were on my side. You have both, sweetheart. My grandfather's voice cracked. You have both. And that little girl of yours, she's going to grow up knowing she's loved, really loved, not the conditional kind. Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you, Grandma. Thank you for being brave enough to deserve it. Dorothy Eleanor Beckett came into the world on November 17, 2024, at 3:42 a.m., 7 pounds, 4 ounces, a full head of dark hair, her father's nose and her mother's stubborn chin. The delivery room held 4 people, me, Marcus, Eleanor, and my mother, who had completed 8 weeks of therapy by then and was learning, slowly, to set her own boundaries. My father was not invited. He sent flowers to the hospital, a massive arrangement of white roses with a card that read, "Congratulations, I'm here when you're ready, Dad." I asked the nurse to leave them in the waiting room for anyone who wanted them. When they placed Dorothy in my arms for the first time, I understood something I hadn't fully grasped before. This tiny person, this perfect, squirming, crying miracle, would look to me for everything, for safety, for love, for her understanding of her own worth. I leaned close to her ear and whispered the first promise I would ever make her. You will never have to earn my love. You will never have to prove you're good enough. You are enough, exactly as you are, and you always will be. Marcus's hand found mine. Eleanor dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. My mother stood at the foot of the bed, tears streaming down her face, looking at her granddaughter with an expression of fierce, protective love. Dorothy Eleanor, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, named for 2 of the strongest women I know, one who taught me that legacy is about love, not money, and one who taught me that it's never too late to stand up for the people you care about. Eleanor laughed through her tears. No pressure, little one. All the pressure, I corrected, smiling. She's going to be magnificent. 6 months after Dorothy was born, I sent my father an email. It was the first direct communication I'd initiated since the baby shower. I wrote it over 3 days, with input from Eleanor, my therapist, and Marcus. Every word was deliberate. Dad, I'm writing to establish clear conditions for any future relationship between us, and between you and Dorothy. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing this to protect my family, including myself. If you want to be part of our lives, here's what needs to happen. You need to attend therapy with a licensed professional who specializes in narcissistic behavior patterns. Not 1 session. A minimum of 6 months, with documentation. You need to write me a letter of apology, a real one, not, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt," not, "I'm sorry, but," a letter that acknowledges specific things you did, takes full responsibility, and doesn't include any conditions or blame. For the first 2 years, any visits with Dorothy must include Marcus or Eleanor. No exceptions. This isn't negotiable. These aren't punishments, Dad. They're safeguards. I love you. I've always loved you. But I love my daughter more. And I will not let her grow up in an environment where cruelty is disguised as honesty and control is disguised as love. The door isn't closed, but the key is in your hands, not mine. Hannah. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. 3 months passed with no response. Then, on a Tuesday morning, a short email appeared in my inbox. Hannah, I've started seeing someone. Dr. Robert Hayes in Buckhead. It's been 2 sessions. I'm not ready to write that letter yet, but I'm trying. Dad. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a start. One year after the baby shower, I sat in my new office at Sterling and Moore, Director of Client Portfolio Management. The nameplate on my desk still felt surreal sometimes. On the credenza behind me, a framed photo of Dorothy at 10 months, all gummy smiles and wild curls, watched over my work. Next to it, a smaller frame held a picture from my grandparents' last visit. 4 generations of Callahan women, my grandmother's hand resting on Dorothy's head like a blessing. My mother had finalized her divorce 3 months earlier. She'd moved into a small apartment in Decatur, started volunteering at a literacy nonprofit, and was dating, cautiously, nervously, a retired professor she'd met at her book club. She saw Dorothy every Sunday and she never once made excuses for my father. Eleanor remained Eleanor, sharp, protective, always ready with legal advice or a glass of wine, depending on what the situation required. She'd become the grandmother Dorothy deserved, the one who showed up without conditions. And my father? He was 6 months into therapy. He'd written 2 drafts of an apology letter, both of which Eleanor had reviewed and rejected as insufficient. He hadn't met Dorothy yet. But he was trying. For the first time in his life, he was actually trying. I didn't know if he would succeed. I didn't know if the damage could ever be fully repaired. Some wounds leave scars, and some patterns are too deeply grooved to change. But I knew this. I was no longer waiting for his approval. I was no longer measuring my worth against his impossible standards. I was no longer the girl who smiled through humiliation to keep the peace. I was Hannah Beckett, director, mother, daughter of people who loved me and people who were learning to. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to support the channel. And if you want to hear more stories about setting boundaries with toxic family members, check out the video linked in the description. It's about a woman whose mother tried to steal her wedding day. I think you'll find it just as powerful. See you in the next one.